Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Dave Pennington. It's great to have you join us today.
It's great to be with you. I'm looking forward to just our conversation today.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. I've started this business a little over 8 years ago, and prior to that, I've done a lot of different things. Been in private education, actually been in ministry even before that. But I've always been in leadership roles, building teams, developing people. That's kind of my sweet spot. That's always what I've enjoyed, what I've done well with. And so I founded this business and started it about a little over 8.5 years ago. And I started more as I would sort of I would say more generally as an executive leadership coach, just helping leaders develop in their companies and provide better leadership. And then I've niched down where I primarily am focusing more on personnel now. I have a process and system I take people through. But what I find is, if I can get the leader positioned or aligned in the role where he's able to bring the highest ROI back to his company, and then I can help him build what I call a complementary dream team, everything else just sort of begins to work. And so that's kind of the process I take people through.
And I think that's one of the biggest struggles for business owners that I notice is creating the right team. And for a lot of them, they have sometimes constrained spending because you can only afford so much for employees. And if you don't hire correctly, you don't see it, but you notice the profit line. It dramatically shifts because a lot of money is getting wasted on people that are not rowing the boat in coordination with the owner. But at the same time, I think it's kind of what you talked about is the owner has to be in alignment. They've got to create a work environment that encourages people. And at times they have to learn to coach, but at other times they have to learn to let go so that the people can do what they're really great at. And that's the key. And I think a lot of times there's too much interference. I'd love to see what you normally see with your clients and how you help them to fix that.
Yeah, what I find, I deal mostly with, I'd say, larger, small to mid-sized companies. That's kind of my avatar, if you want to call it that. And I call them player coaches. And what I mean by that is typically they are playing a major role on the team, like say they're starting shortstop of the baseball team, and they are coaching the team simultaneously, which can be done, but frankly, it's kind of challenging to do that. Um, and usually what happens is because they were early in either founding the business or growing the business, they have just added a hat, then they've added a hat, then they've added a hat, and they have all these different hats that they're wearing. And often what's happened is they've never really developed the level of employee that can really help them run the business. Everything sort of rises and falls upon them. And it's funny because when I begin with them, often what I do is I say, "Do you have an org chart?" Now, some people do. They have one, but a lot of them don't. They don't. They've never really established an organizational chart. So I said, well, just scratch it out on paper and show it to me. It's interesting because inevitably it winds up looking a little bit something like this. One guy at the top and a bunch of things that he's doing. And so I tease him and I say, "Oh, you're the fireman." And what I mean by that is everybody's coming to you and you're putting out fires all day long. And really they're functioning a little bit like this. They're kind of maxed out. I mean, they can't handle anything else. And there's no room for growth or ability to grow because if to grow means they've got to do more and they can't do any more than what they're currently doing. And frankly, they're exhausted and sometimes even a little discouraged. And so I start with the owner. And I have some assessments and things that I use that really help the owner sort of recognize, I'll call it his zone of genius. You know, I always say this, look, everybody's good at something, no one's good at everything. So what are you really good at? What do you really love doing? And then I help them to evaluate how much of their time, energy, and focus is going to what they love doing and what they're good at versus all the other stuff that they're just doing. And it's quite surprising to them. In fact, sometimes I have them come back after they do their initial org chart and they say, wow, I never realized. And I usually tell them, I want you to put your name on here everywhere you're doing something. And they come back, I never realized all that I'm doing. And I've even had people say, no wonder I'm so exhausted all the time. I'm just doing way too many things and it's just not working for them.
So when they're that busy and they've been wearing every hat, where do you begin with to have them let go and to train others? Because it's that catch 22, right? I need to train people, but I don't have time to train people, and we need to get this done. And it becomes this never ending battle back and forth. So where do you start?
Well, I start actually with them because here's what I find. They're good at something. For example, I had a guy who had a small computer. He still has a small computer service firm. A half dozen people or so that works for him. And I first started talking to him. I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about your company." I said, "You kind of have business development or sales, and you have operations. Which one are you?" He says, "Oh, I'm sales. Without any question, I'm sales." I said, "Really? Tell me about it." He says, "Well, I'm not trying to brag or anything." He says, "But if I get before people, I close like 80% of everybody I talk to." I said, "Wow, 80% close ratio. I'm impressed. That's pretty good. I said, "What about the operations side?" He says, "No, not my thing. I hate it. I'm terrible at it." And I said, "All right, be honest with me right now. What amount of time, energy, and focus are you giving towards sales versus operations?" To my surprise, he came back and said, "I'm about 85% operations and only 15% sales." And I said, "Wow, you kill it in sales and you hate operations and you're doing 85% operations." So I just paused and I said, "Well, how's that working for you?" Literally his head dropped. He says, "It's not. Right now I hate my life. Every day is just all I can do to keep going." So I said, "Well, what would happen if we could find you someone in operations who could take over not 100% of it, but about 80% of it? You'll probably still have to do 20% because you're the owner, but you can handle that. And we got you out of operations back into sales." He paused. He said, "If I did that," he said, "I'd double my business in about 18 months." So long story made short, got the operations guy in place, got everything working there. He got back over into sales. He got into some government contracts, and his company just kind of took off. So that's kind of an example, because what happens is if you're doing a lot of stuff you shouldn't be doing, you're actually limiting the ROI of you by how you're investing yourself in your company. And you want to raise that ROI, and then you want to look for what I call complementary dream team members. And usually the way I say that is, believe it or not, there are actually people that love doing what you hate doing, and they're really good at it. And you need to find those people.
What do you do when, because for a small business owner, a lot of times it's hard to compete, especially in today's environment, post COVID. Salaries have gone up dramatically, the cost of people, and then you get a lot of people who they're just not motivated. And I think it's because they're in a wrong fit of a job. So how do we deal with those situations?
Well, I think to begin with, the first thing you have to do is really get clarity about who you need on your team. For example, this example I gave you, if you're a salesperson and you love selling, often what as an owner you do is you take yourself out of sales. Uh, Sometimes we don't even value what our strengths are. We almost feel like, well, hey, anybody could do that, but that's not. I mean, you're good at it because that's naturally who you are. So you don't want to remove yourself out of what you do well. You want to find people that complement you. Like in this case, he needed an operational guy. And so once he found that guy who was good at operations, it freed him up. And often we think about employees costing us money, and they do cost money. But if you get the right people, they actually wind up making you money. And you can't do it all overnight. You have to gradually work your way there. But what I try to do is get the owner aligned, and then we talk about, okay, what's the first position that he should replace? Something he's been doing, he doesn't like doing, he's not really great at doing, but he needs someone that can take that role. Let's start with that one. And we begin to get that in place and then get it working well. And then we go on to the next one, and then we go on to the next one. So it doesn't happen overnight, but little by little. And I'm really talking about, I gave you this example, moving them from this one guy at the top with a bunch of things. I suggest you have somewhere between 3 to 5 direct reports. And these are people that you have brought on your team that take over a major section, vertical, whatever you want to call them, of your company, and can really grow into a role of leadership. And then what happens for you as the owner, rather than being the person who's doing everything, which is what you're used to, you actually wind up spending your time helping the people you've brought on your team develop so that they can do their component, their section of the business even better. And I try to initially get them about 50% of what they're doing. I try to get it off their platter so they're not buried in the day to day so much, and they have time to look for the right people. They have time to develop the people that they bring on their team. And I have a whole process that I take people through in how to do this.
Do they do they sometimes have to let people go in the beginning because they don't have the right people on their team, or do you get those people to adapt and change? What do you usually find in these situations?
It can vary a lot. I always suggest if you have someone on your team that you can reposition, realign, that's the best way to go because they're already there. You already have a relationship with them. And you can run the risk of demoralizing the rest of your crew if you let people go. So there's a lot of sensitivities that you have to work through. But if you have someone that could work, often what happens is we may have someone, but we just have them in the wrong position. For example, I have a printer that is a newer client to me, and I was talking with him a while back, and he was telling me about a key employee in his company. And I said, well, why don't you let me meet with her, and I'll give her an assessment. We'll talk about it, and maybe that would help as we're trying to build things out for the future. So I did that, and after meeting with her, I said, I don't know if you thought about this, but I really think that you're probably not in the best position for you in this company. And she was like, well, what do you mean? And I said, I think you would really fit better over here. And I described what that job would require, and she just kind of lit up and said, boy, I'd love to do that. That would just be, that would be ideal for me. And so in talking to the owner, he actually made a switch. He took her from what she was doing, moved her over to a different role, and that took about 30% of what he had been doing off of his platter immediately. And she was very competent and very capable. And now we're in the process of looking, all right, who else do we have on your team that needs to be repositioned or needs to be either let go or needs to be hired and brought on the team? So one of the things I love about what I'm doing, it's not a cookie cutter approach because every leader is different, every organization is different. The principles and concepts are the same, but the customization is what really makes it work and allows the owner to be successful in things.
Are there certain types of assessments that you use that you find helpful? I'm familiar with like DISC, Myers-Briggs, and all of these different types of things. Is that what you're using to help figure out where they belong, or do you use something proprietary or different than that?
I have a couple that I use. DISC is one of them. I use DISC for a variety of ways. Some of them is placement. For example, if you're familiar with DISC, if you have a high I as a DISC, you don't want to take that person and put them in the back room where they never talk to anyone. You'll drive them crazy, okay? Because they're people, okay? On the other hand, if you have a high C, you don't want to put that person in a position where he's having to make quick decisions without able to do much research. He's kind of flying by the seat of his pants. That's not going to work for him. So placement is helpful. But the other thing I use DISC for, particularly as a leader, is what I say is this: everybody has kind of a default leadership style. Your default leadership style is based upon your personality. And the way most companies work is whoever's the alpha within the organization, they set sort of the culture for the organization as far as the way they work. And everybody has to adapt to the alpha, which will work, you know. And once they learn the style of the leader, they adapt to the style of the leader, and that will work. But a much more effective way to do it as a leader is to develop multiple leadership styles where you don't lead everybody the same way. Because if you only lead them the way that works for you, unless everybody on your team is exactly like you, which is never the case, okay, it's not going to be that effective for them. The other assessment I use is called one called UMAP. If you want to look it up, it's myyoumap.com. A friend of mine developed this assessment. In fact, actually, she was a former client of mine. And it's a holistic assessment that looks at four areas. It looks at your strengths. It uses strength finders for that, if you're familiar with strength finders. It looks at your values. Values are things that are important to you. They may be moral or ethical, but they're just things that are important to you. For example, one of my values is quality. So if I'm involved with something and people are just kind of slapping it together and sending it out the door, that's not going to work for me because I don't want to be involved in something that's not quality. Okay. So we all have our different values. And sometimes what happens is because our values don't align, We just don't feel we can't engage fully within the organization. Thirdly, it looks at your skills. It's interesting because it divides your skills between skills that energize you and skills that drain you. What happens is we all learn how to do things that we don't like doing, that we can get okay at, but when we're doing it and it's not an energizing skill, usually at the end of the day, we're exhausted. And you want to stay out of things that you've learned to do, but just exhaust you. You primarily want to do things that energize you, and then kind of looks at your passion. So it's more of a holistic assessment. I find between those two assessments, I can pretty well help gauge where people should be. And, obviously you look at their background, their training, and a variety of other things that can help as well.
And one of the big things that we like to talk about is I think too often we hire for skills and experience, and we don't look at cultural fit and values fit. Um, I think it's a lot easier to teach people a skill than it is to change the way they behave.
Exactly.
And so it's being more focused on, hey, what is this person going to fit into our organization, or are they going to be constantly causing problems? And even though they have skills and they might be the best at what they do, it might not be a good cultural fit. Is that what you found as well?
I think you're right there. I actually have kind of a four-pronged approach. I start with the actual hiring component, and just like you mentioned, it's more than just skills or training. It's maybe work ethic could be part of it. Certainly, would they be a good cultural fit for your company? Because if they're not going to fit into the culture, they are probably going to cause problems, and so you want them to fit. And I find a lot of times people, I call it, they hire based on their gut. And what I mean by that is we find someone we like, they kind of really don't quite fit what we need, but we like them, so we sort of adjust the job to fit the person rather than finding the person to fit the job. Um, but, so looking at all of those things. And then secondly, I really emphasize onboarding. In many, many companies, there's almost no onboarding process at all. It's, here's your computer, there's your cubicle, here's an office manual. I hope you make it. That's about it. Okay. And, I've talked to people in corporate all the time. They tell me that, that was their onboarding process, not much there. But what you want to do when you hire someone, they're wanting to come in and please you. They're wanting to come in and do a good job. So you want to help them to understand what are the 3 to 5 things that they need to do exceptionally well to be successful in that role. Now, they'll figure it out on their own over a period of time if they're decent people. But why would you make them wait 3 months, 6 months, a year, 18 months to try to figure out how all of this works and what their role is in contrast to others within the company? You want to help them see that up front so they know automatically what they can do to be successful right out of the gate. It's kind of rolling out the red carpet to them. You want them to be successful and they want to be successful. And then thirdly, I think just as important is helping people develop. When we get people, particularly in those key sort of supportive roles like VP roles or whatever, we actually want to just not just stop there, because people don't usually develop themselves. As a leader, as an owner, you need to lean in, get to know them, and help them develop and grow. You need to know what is their aptitude. Sometimes you will hire them for one role, and you actually find they fit a little bit better over here once you get to know them because they have aptitude you didn't even know about. What are their aspirations? Where do they want to go in life? What do they want to accomplish? A lot of times as an employee, it's kind of a win-lose situation, if you know what I mean by that. The company wins, and as an employee, I lose. That's not very motivating. You want to make it a win-win. You want to develop the employee and help them reach their highest potential and ability to help your company and as a person. And then what happens is they win, and then you know what? Your company wins also. And then the last component I focus on is retention, because once you get good people, you know what? You want to keep them. And often we think the reason we lose them is because of money or lack of money. Not usually the reason. They leave because they don't feel valued, they don't feel appreciated, there's no opportunity for growth for them, or frankly, just poor management. And, they're like, this isn't working for me. I got to go somewhere that's going to work better. And so you really want to lean in and keep them. And sure, there'll come a time when sometimes they will leave you. You invest a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money into developing them, and they leave you. But when they leave you, It's more kind of like this. It's like, wow, I knew this day would probably come one day, and I hate it that it's here. I have really enjoyed being here. You have just helped me grow. In fact, I wouldn't even have this new position if it were not for you. And here's what will usually happen. They will actually wind up sending you people to replace them because they're so appreciative of all the investment you made in them. They want to help you in your company. And so those four areas of really having good clarity about hiring, onboarding, developing, and retaining make all the difference in the world. And it allows your company to really be financially profitable and frankly, just a whole lot easier to run.
And I found on the hiring side two great books. One was Who, and the other was Top Grading. Because I think more often than not, we tend to hire people because we like them, not because they are the best fit for the position and can do the job the best. And I think that's where we get into trouble as business owners, is actually not having a good criteria to hire them. And then, as you said, and I think a lot of business owners, they think throwing more money at the problem or paying people more is the solution. And what I've found is every time you start giving them bonuses or raises, they tend to leave, which is kind of counter to what you'd expect. But and it's funny because I was recently reading a book on psychology, and it was around money and motivation. And it was like the money actually demotivates people. It takes away what they were talking about was their intrinsic desire to do things. And it kind of turns that off where money gets in the wrong kind of place with regards to employees. I don't know if
Well,
you've
and
had
frankly,
that
not
experience.
everybody, I mean, everybody wants to make good money, but money is not a motivator for everyone. Okay. And I think sometimes if you like money and that's kind of a main motivator for you, it's easy to assume that everybody is motivated like you're motivated, which is not always the case. So that's the idea of leaning in and getting to know your people well. For example, I've had a few overseas VAs, and one of the things I've done is, for them, they typically make decent money compared to most people in their country. But I always say, well, let's talk a little bit about your aspirations. What are you wanting? What are your goals in life? Sometimes they want to get a car and they've not been able to afford a very nice car, or maybe they want to buy a home. Okay. Well, if I know what their motivations are, then often if I'm going to bonus them or provide for them in some way, then I typically might tie that bonus to some sort of goal or aspiration they have. So it's not just throwing money at it, but it's actually helping them accomplish a major goal that they're wanting to accomplish in their lives because I know that's really what they're motivated. That's really one of the reasons they're working. And I think sometimes, we make the mistake, particularly in America, where we just throw money at everything and assume that will solve the problem.
That rarely works out. Money is usually not the answer. And I think too often as business owners, that's how we solve our problems. Instead of actually taking the time to be resourceful and figure out what's going on, and in doing that, we throw money at everything. And then we wonder why we don't have any money at the end of the day and why things still aren't fixed, even though we threw money at it, which creates a massive problem. And on the personal side, I tell my clients, your employees more often than not don't understand financials. They're not so good personally with their financials. So how do you expect them to be good with your business financials or to even understand those concepts? And sometimes you just have to explain to them that, hey, we have to serve our clients. We have to do this because if we don't, you don't get paid. And a lot of times I think they don't connect those dots. Is anything in your framework actually help the
Well,
employee on that side or
yeah,
not
I mean,
really?
I think the key, for example, if I had someone like that I was employing, you know, probably what I would lean in is try to help to understand that my goal is to uh, make their lives better and help them develop as a person, not just in the job or the role that they have, but even in their personal life. And there's a balance there. Sometimes people are a little, I mean, but if they sense you're sincere and you're genuine and you really want to help them, often you might wind up actually helping them learn how to use money better, how to manage money better. And then that spills back over into the job. But the point of it is I want to develop that employee to be the best person that he or she can be and the best worker that he or she can be. When I do that and I'm investing in them, there's a principle of reciprocity that comes. You know what? When they see I'm investing in them, you know what that causes them to do? Often it causes them to work a little harder because they really want me to appreciate, they want to demonstrate their appreciation to me that I have spent the time, made the effort, spent some money, whatever it might be, to actually invest in them. And they want to really help me grow my business and help it become more profitable.
That's nice. Is there anything that we should have talked about but didn't get a chance to?
I think a lot of it comes down to this word. I think many business owners don't really value their people. Now they say they do, but not often. I mean, you think about it. The most valuable commodity you have as a business owner is your time, because you can't get any more time. You only have what you have, and you got to use it as well as you can. The second most valuable commodity you have is not your money, because frankly, there are many ways you can get more money, but it's your people. And if you have the right people, you actually the profit will come. But investing in people and really, looking at them as very valuable team members that you want to help personally and kind of, if you want to call it, develop personally, what happens is that really just causes the company to soar because they get connected with you, they appreciate it, they catch your vision, they want to help you be successful, and then obviously if you're rewarding them, that even motivates them more. But I think that would be the main thing is, as an owner, as a leader, first, make sure you're properly aligned within your organization as best as you can, where you're functioning at the highest ability to bring ROI back to the company. And second, get the right people on your team and lean in and invest in them, value them. And I think you'll see that the reward will be there. It'll pay off in droves.
It definitely will. But and this is where I think a lot of business owners struggle. They don't put the time into building the foundation, which this is all foundational work.
Yep.
And we get ahead of ourselves in building foundations is boring. And then we wonder why we're struggling so much later on. So you got to take the step back and go
Well,
build
and
that
sometimes
strong
if we're honest,
foundation and put it into place so that
yeah,
you are
sometimes if
not the bottleneck in
sometimes
your
if we're
business.
honest, what we do, we expect the employees just to step up and do it. Now, I'm not saying that will never happen, but whenever I talk to a business owner and they say, well, I've got some kind of goofy employees and I've got some difficult clients. And I always say, when I lift the hood and kick the tires, ultimately, it always comes back to leadership. Because when you're the right leader and you're stepping up and providing the right leadership, you will address all of those issues and you will improve all of those areas to the point where you're not putting out fires all the time. But a lot of business owners do put out fires, just really because they haven't taken the time to do the foundational work, as you talked about.
If people would like to get your help or learn more about you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Probably 2 or 3 ways. I'm on LinkedIn. There's lots of information on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. So that's pretty easy to find. Um, then I have a website, and it's PENN coaching.com. PENN coaching.com. Or frankly, if they just want to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more, they can email me at dave@PennCoaching.com. Any of those ways you can connect with me. I love to meet people and kind of learn a little bit about them and their business. And, if I can help them, I'm glad to help them. If I can't, usually I know someone to whom I can refer them. I'm glad to do that. So any of those ways would be ways that they could connect with me.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a delight, Rocky.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.